Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guests today are Brooks Lustig, COO and co-founder, and Robbie Wroblewski, Director of Community Outreach for Seed & Smith. The gentlemen of Seed & Smith, Brooks Lustig and Robbie Wroblewski. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. How you doing?
I'm good. I promised Robbie before we recorded that I wouldn't butcher his name, and look, I halfway did it, but I came through at the end, I think. So sorry about that, Robbie.
It always happens, man. No worries at all.
Wroblewski. Well, hey, I'm really excited to have you guys on today. For those of you listening, as I mentioned, Brooks and Robbie on. Brooks is the CEO, and Robbie is the Director of Community Outreach for Seed & Smith. And Seed & Smith is a fully certified Colorado cannabis grow and marijuana dispensary, providing premium crafted wholesale cannabis concentrate, medical cannabis, and recreational cannabis. So, guys, before we jump into Seed & Smith, and all the great things y'all are doing in Colorado, let's first talk about your backgrounds. Brooks, let's start with you. From what I've researched, I know that you had previously been in the cannabis space before taking the helm at Seed & Smith. Is that right?
Yeah, I started with a couple buddies in Boulder, Colorado. We bought a company in Denver called Southwest Alternative Care in 2009, and we built a couple small grows and had a couple small dispensaries. We eventually rebranded that as Kaya Cannabis, and Kaya Cannabis is still running, going strong today. I sit on the board there, but like you said, in 2014, my primary roles became to design, build, and implement Seed & Smith to what it is today.
Awesome. And Robbie, how about you? From what I've read, I think that you're fairly new. I mean, you've been in the cannabis industry for a number of years now, but that wasn't where you started in your professional career. Is that right?
No, I originally graduated and worked in journalism for a couple years right after college, doing some documentary filmmaking and stuff like that, and then entered into the entry-level positions in cannabis in 2012. So I started at the very bottom, working my way up from trim positions and bud tending positions to managerial and now director role with Seed & Smith.
Nice. And in hindsight, I mean, that was in 2012, making the transition from journalism to cannabis. I would say being in 2020, that was the right move, huh?
I mean, it was a move. It was a move that, a lot of people who graduated at my time, we all had to go to different areas. We all had to go to different fields. The news industry has been tumultuous for quite a while, and so I made that decision early on. Yeah, and I've been in cannabis ever since, and I've loved it.
Yeah, it's a great industry to be in. I'm starting this year, but I have been a user and an advocate for many years. And I always ask this question to people that have transitioned from one industry to this industry. And did you receive a lot of pushback or flack from previous industry peers? Were they kind of unsure of why you were moving into cannabis, or?
No, what I usually tell people is that I took my profession and turned it into a hobby, and I turned my hobby into my profession. People always knew that I was a big cannabis advocate. I've been open about it since I got into college, and so people completely understood that transition. And everybody wished me good luck, and I'm starting to reconnect with them now, being in a more marketing role and a PR role.
Awesome. And Brooks, going back to you, so I know that you have experience building a previous company within the space, Kaya, you mentioned. And so from there, I mean, did you first start like on the cultivating and growing side? Was it business operations? Like, what did you focus on first?
Yeah, so initially it was, we had no idea what we were doing to start. And my role over at the old company, Kaya, was to basically find a grow, find a building to rent. The regulations had come down, things had gotten serious. You had to have a business license to do this. You had to start to follow all the state regs, which were about to be handed down. And so my role was to find a building and somehow grow cannabis out of it. So we found an old restaurant supply warehouse, and look, I'm from Boulder, Colorado, and where all the good growers are, up west of here. And so we hired some of them to kind of come down and work with us and kind of show us how it works. And with some of my engineering skills and things like that, combined with their cannabis knowledge, we got this whole thing started. And we were lucky enough and successful enough that in 2014, when it came time to do Seed & Smith, we just got this amazing opportunity to find a much larger facility and really build a cannabis operation from the ground up to provide these, I guess I would say like boutique style products, yet on a slightly commercial scale. So I'm in it really just for the excitement of like building these processes and building the cultivation extraction side of the business. It hasn't been until recently, the last couple of years, where I've really gotten involved with people like Robbie and the creative side and the marketing side and the sales side and that whole kind of stuff. So that's been a whirlwind learning experience for me, I would say, over Robbie, like the last three and a half years now. And yeah, I don't know, here we are.
I have definitely put you through the grinder on creative work.
It's been fun though.
Well, and that it is a grinder, especially within the cannabis industry. I mean, I've talked about this a lot in terms of the challenges that come with marketing and messaging for cannabis, right? I mean, obviously on the THC side, it's federally illegal by the government, but then if you look at the CBD and CBG side, there's no FDA guidelines, even though that hemp is legal to cultivate at a mass scale. So, how has Colorado, being an adult use state, helped with those regulations and making it easier for these business owners?
So it's been a really interesting scenario, working in a market where you've got state approval for everything, clearly. And, the regulations here in Colorado, I would say are some of the strictest. And that probably comes as Colorado being, the first state to enter all this thing. Sorry to the Washington folks, we can debate that one, till the sun goes down. But, it's been an interesting situation where, Colorado has had to, the state government here, has had to take the role of the federal government that you would see in any other industry, right? And so perfect example is, the pesticides that you aren't allowed to use on these crops, right? Normally the FDA regulates something like this. And so when state leaders went to the FDA and said, what can these growers, what can they or cannot they not use on their crops? The FDA said, we're not going to touch this. And so the state just had to start from the ground up and really develop their own program. And, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work with some of the state task groups, whether it was developing laws around marketing, whether it was developing laws around pesticides and all that. And so it was interesting to see that process, but we really had to do it on our own. And so you've got this kind of weird system of regulations as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, and diving a bit further in that, like I know for some of the guests that I've had on, say from Colorado or from California, a big pain point that they're experiencing is the taxation of cannabis, right? And they're looking to really push for reform in that area and come up with a fair tax policy. Is that the same situation that Colorado has? I mean, are taxes super high when it comes to operating cannabis business, or not so much?
I guess, the quick answer is yes and no. I'm not intimately familiar with the California tax structure, so I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But, I can tell you in Colorado, the tax, it falls almost directly between cigarettes and beer. So, in my opinion, it's a hefty tax, no doubt, but it's also, is also this is like big experiment here in Colorado, right? And you know, having that tax is one way that the industry can contribute to a lot of things that are good in our state. Whether that be programs that are helping people now, state-based programs that are helping people now who are out of a job because of COVID, whether it's helping, the music industry, the restaurant industry, things like that have come from the state. Some of that stuff, some of those cannabis tax dollars can be used for that. Primarily in Colorado, it's supposed to go to new school construction. And I'm not going to be the expert there. I assume a fair portion of it does. But it's my belief that I think we're in the right spot with taxes here in Colorado. And, for the most part, I trust that the money's going to go to the right place here within the state. Go ahead, Robbie, please.
Sorry. I was just going to say that's actually been like one of the biggest points from Amendment 64 is that we as an industry enjoy how they want to put our tax dollars to work. And as Brooks hinted, like, whether or not that's how it is one thing. But there's a lot of our tax dollars that go to building those new schools that they're actually trying to free up now, even during the pandemic, to release some funding for schools that are struggling with getting data and getting kids into virtual learning and all these kind of factors that are starting to build up. So they use these taxes pretty well to support our youth in the state, and I think that's been a big part of why you don't hear a lot of gruff from the industry about it. And of course, federal is federal. So
yeah, that's a good segue, Robbie. I do think that one thing that everybody, across the board in the cannabis industry can and should get behind is there's discrepancy compared to us and other industries when it comes to our federal taxes. Because we are a federally illegal business, anything that you do to sell cannabis or traffic cannabis by the IRS definition, which is basically what all the bud tenders do, what all our wholesale people do, whether it's B2B or to the end patient or end consumer. No cannabis in the country gets to legally write off those business expenses. And so if I pay a bud tender, whatever it is, 40 grand a year, right? The IRS looks at that as profit that I made and taxes me on that money that we paid to somebody else. And that's across the board. And, there would be significantly, there'd be much higher number of cannabis companies that survive, the next 3 to 5 years here, if there could be some federal reform around that tax code specifically.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge chokehold, right? I mean, you're trying to operate a business, and any other legitimate business outside of the cannabis industry is able to write off those tax deductions, like you mentioned, right? Everything from entertainment to meals, to your electricity bills if you're operating out of your residence or what have you, right? I mean, all these different factors that you could deduct, and you're saying that you're unable to do so, even when you're operating in an adult use state like Colorado. It's because of the federal scheduling.
Yep. And so, for example, the perfect example here is, Robbie, you are worth every penny, my friend. Don't you worry about it. However, I pay 150% of what I should pay Robbie because I can't write his salary off as taxes because he's involved with promoting our brand, promoting cannabis, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, let's talk about even like banking, right? And we've heard, at least on the hemp side, it's virtually impossible to open up a bank account, even if even though the Farm Bill of 2018 was passed, where it allows for mass cultivation of hemp. So in your experience being on the THC side in an adult use state like Colorado, have you still faced issues with banking and that?
Yeah. Look, I think we face banking issues every day. I can tell you that Colorado's come a long way in the early days, really up until recreational happened with Amendment 64 in 2014, very, very few people, if any, had a bank. And, the people who did were probably not telling the whole truth, when they showed up there at the bank. But what happened is you had a couple people and a couple banking institutions, state banks, who did believe in the cause here, that did believe this is a good thing and saw an opportunity. And so you had a handful that jumped in and jumped through, I imagine, countless regulations with the Fed to get this up and running. And they cost a pretty penny to have a regular bank account. And the bank accounts are very basic, such as like a checking account that your parents signed you up for in like third grade. That's probably the level of sophistication. Now the bankers are going to say the opposite, about how much scrutiny and everything like that is on this account. But we don't get to perform a lot of the basic banking functions. And so, at Seton Smith, we're very lucky to have a bank. We can run a payroll system. We can cut checks to people, all that good stuff. But for example, if you want to come in to my store and use your Visa card, no chance, right? That's just not a solution that's available to anybody. There's some people working on apps and things like that, but, haven't seen a lot yet.
And when you say that, you're referring specifically to like the POS, the point of sale systems, right? Like your Stripes or your Squares or your and those companies are not being as friendly in the cannabis.
It's not necessarily the Square company or anything like that. The POS people are actually all for it. What it comes down to is your Visas, your Discovers. It comes down to the credit card companies. They won't allow cards that use what's called in the industry their rails or their lines of communication to come from cannabis people. So I don't know to speak specifically for Square, but an app-based company has no problem allowing you to use a credit card, but Visa says no.
Got you. And are you hopeful with these banking laws and the potential for them to be reformed? I mean, of course, the Safe Banking Act has been tied or included into the HEROES Act, which is the COVID stimulus relief package, but doesn't look like that's going to pass the Senate. So when do you expect these banking laws to become more open and friendly to cannabis companies?
So I think in Colorado, the state's done a lot of good work, and I think that I think we'll see one of two things. Either we'll see somebody with a creative solution, like basically their own communication system here. I mean, ultimately, Visa's got the stranglehold on the credit cards that they say can't be used, it can't be used. But we're seeing people who have some creative solutions with just your debit card, that's linked directly to your bank account. So we could see like some Venmo type operations go through. Otherwise, honestly, I think for the real big dogs to get comfortable, you're going to have to see a descheduling event on the federal level.
Descheduling or complete removal, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, either or.
Right. At this point, it's just laughable that it's Schedule 1. It's not only depressing, but just laughable that it's Schedule 1.
It really is, Robbie. And it's what's funny about it is, I mean, the one kind of statement that I always go back to when that comes up is there hasn't been one recorded overdose or death related to cannabis. And the Schedule 1 listing is all about how harmful the narcotic is, right? So right there, it's just counterintuitive. It doesn't match. It doesn't fit.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's right. And that's, I think, what I am most hopeful for in all of this with the bankings and the regulations and everything is that we just see the removal from Schedule 1 so that we can open up those research avenues and really start driving the idea and driving the ideas that we've had about cannabis in the past. Learning more about these terpenes, learning more about the bud structure and what is actually going, like what happens within our cannabinoid system. So that is my biggest hope federally, is that we see that Schedule 1 removed.
Yeah, no, me as well. And that's actually a perfect segue because I wanted to talk about Seton Smith and the education component of what y'all are doing. I was really fascinated to look on your website, did some research around your grow tours. So why don't y'all explain what those are? And obviously, due to the recent pandemic, how have you had to pivot and move from the in-person grow tours to the virtual tours?
So yeah, I'll take this one. Our look, education is as at the cornerstone of our business model. From the time that I've even started at Seed and Smith, it has always been an idea that we are here to educate the populace. An educated, an informed citizen is a educated citizen kind of mentality with that. And because we are the cannabis industry and we've started from such grassroots and we've started from such underground methods, there's a lot of contradiction in what people are being told, whether they're in a legal state or whether they're not in a legal state. And so that's really what the educational aspect of what we are doing is about just giving that basic information to people so that they can enjoy a product that they know more about. And as far as our tours go, they were akin to brewery tours that we have all over this state, breweries and distilleries, even what's the tea company, Brooks?
Celestial Seasonings.
Yeah, Celestial Seasonings. So I mean, like we want to be a part of that kind of tourism aspect of people coming to Colorado to enjoy that want to enjoy cannabis, have all the knowledge that they want. Now with the pandemic, it's taken a different turn for sure. We've made it a point recently to really get back to these tours, and just educating people, and we can do this now at a macro level where people from all around can come in and learn about these things. There's no absolute requirement of needing to be in the state in order to get this education. So we've looked at it a number of different ways, and we've tried doing it on our own. But the best ways that we've seen to really inform people at this time and get that schedule where they want it, where they want to participate in this, is to partner with other folks. So we've actually partnered with one of our favorite vendors. Their name is Leaf 4 and 1, and they provide a they provide a hotline for people to call in and get medical background information on any kind of cannabis, any kind of products that they're looking to use. If they do have issues with cannabis, like how can we mitigate those issues. So this hotline is developed by nurses and doctors in order to give that information, because part of the regulations here in Colorado is that as a cannabis team, we are not medical professionals, and we should not be giving out medical advice or medical information that we are not really qualified to do so. So we did the next best thing. We went out and found us a bunch of nurses and doctors that are going to help us through that. And in turn, they're actually doing like online conferences where we get an opportunity to be doing those tours.
So that's really interesting. So how are you sourcing those medical professionals? I know others that I've spoken to previously on the podcast, especially in the medical field, they've kind of echoed that when they were in college and they were going through university and doing their studies in the medical profession, that the endocannabinoid system was hardly talked about, if at all, right? So are you sourcing specialists that focus on the endocannabinoid system in cannabis, or these are your traditional doctors that have just kind of adopted and learned about the endocannabinoid system since it became legal in Colorado?
It's a little bit of both. A couple of the nurses that we work directly with are retired from nursing, and so this is what they find, that this is such an important need that they have come back into the field, and kept their licensing going so that they can update members in the medical field on information that they're finding out about cannabis, and then they can keep that medical information flowing to people that have those questions. Because you're absolutely right, it's hardly ever talked about in the medical field. And like that's another avenue that we're trying to change, and trying to help people realize that even with just the base information that we give on some of these tours or that we give on these conferences, you're going to learn enough that I think that you could find good medical basis to start doing some research on that.
Mm-hmm.
But it all comes back to Schedule 1.
Right, exactly. And I mean, in your experience with the education and talking to consumers, is there any common misunderstandings that you've come across as it relates to THC and cannabis?
It's so wide ranging. It's so wide ranging. I think the most overwhelming aspect, and I think it's more about populations that we actually serve, right? Um, One of the biggest populations that we serve is the 55 plus crowd, and especially for these tours and this education, it's almost like they used to smoke weed in the 60s and the 70s, and then they smoke one joint in 2018 and they almost lost their minds.
Mm.
And you know, they're like, so what has happened to me? Why can't I do this anymore? And it's you know, you just have to sit there and be like, look, it's a lot different than the 60s. We're going to take you through all this information and show you that the quality of cannabis that you're now consuming these days is a lot better for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I've encountered that also where I've hung out with somebody that's older or, you know, and they try it and it's not the cannabis that they were used to back in the day. It's, you know, these levels are very potent. They're high. And like you said, they just kind of are transported to another world. And so, do you think that that's part of the reason why maybe this older crowd is gravitating more to the CBD side, which is non-psychoactive as opposed to THC?
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely makes sense. Like I've definitely come across quite a number of seniors, and in that 55 plus group, not that they're seniors, but in that older crowd where they are trying this CBD, a lot more frequently than they are trying THC. However, one of the fastest growing populations in THC is still 55 plus. It's almost like they use CBD as that jumping off point, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because some of the latest research that we have coming out of Israel suggests that CBD is a lot more beneficial with just a small, minute amount of THC to open up the receptors in your cannabinoid systems.
Sure. And that makes sense because that points back to the entourage effect and you know, full spectrum versus isolate, and how you really want a wide range of those cannabinoids to help and hit those receptors so that you get the full effect, right?
And terpenes along with it for sure.
Yep. Well, hey, let's talk a little more about some of the other changes and pivots that Seed and Smith has had to make during COVID. I think I read a press release where y'all were offering free samples to your employees, and then you also kind of implemented some Netflix type subscription model for customers. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we did here is, look, I mean, everybody has their own COVID shutdown story from the middle of March. You know, ours in Colorado was literally overnight. You know, we're watching the news, and the mayor Mayor Denver comes on television, and he says that, you know, starting on Friday or whatever it is, which is the next day, um, all non-essential businesses are going to be closed. And one of the reporters raises his hand and asks, you know, does that include liquor stores and cannabis stores? And the mayor of Denver says, of course it does. And within 20 minutes, every liquor store and cannabis shop in the city had a line practically around the block.
Everybody's stocking up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was.
I mean, everybody. It was
And
wild.
so
Wow.
then, you know, he comes back on TV a couple hours later and says, we've readjusted our policy here, and we think that you know, cannabis shops and liquor stores are essential businesses. Which ultimately, you know, you got to give him credit, right? He made the right choice here. You know, rather than create a bunch of people getting into small spaces all at once, which is the last thing you want to do. he allowed us to stay open through this. And, in all seriousness, we really did try to pivot. At Seed & Smith, we really respect what our state officials are trying to do to keep everybody safe. I know Robbie and myself and, Seed & Smith community as a whole are regularly involved with the service industry, whether, we all have friends in the service industry, we all hang out with them, we all go to their restaurants, we play in bands with them, we go, see them perform, right? Several of my employees have, their day job is running the extraction machine and their night job is selling tickets outside, one of the local bars that plays bluegrass music or right, whatever it is. And so, just to see all that stop, we really realized that, like, hey, we need to do our part here to keep this thing going, and we need to do it safely, A, to protect our Seed & Smith family, and B, to protect the public that's coming here so we can, get over this thing as fast as possible. So we've readjusted what our store looks like. We now have curbside pickup. Robbie did an amazing amount of work getting our entire menu online, and so now you can order from your phone. There's still regulations where the transaction has to happen, on site, but you can put everything on your phone in your order, and somebody will bring a little machine out to your car, and you can put your debit card in there. So about as contactless as you can get, and then they'll bring your product out right to you. We do operate with people at the store, and we are mask believers, for better or for worse, and mostly because it's the right thing to do, and it's following the law here in Colorado. And so we offer all of our patients or recreational customers masks if they don't have one, so they can come in and shop. We've worked hard to keep those wait times short, even though we can only allow so few people into the store. Robbie already talked to you a lot about virtual tours. That's kind of the physical changes that we've made at Seed & Smith. Behind the scenes, we've staggered shifts. You can see neither Robbie nor I is that this is not the Seed & Smith kitchen. This is my kitchen. So it's we try and do all the meetings we can remotely in places where people have to be on site, whether that's for growing or for packaging or what have you, or retail. We've opened up offices and space so that they can maintain 6 feet of distance and wear their mask and do their job and kind of keep this thing going. So it's been an interesting experience, but I can say that I'm so proud of our staff as a whole, of just how they've dealt with this and how they've taken it seriously, and didn't miss a beat ultimately.
Yeah, it sounds like y'all have really put the correct protocols in place, and as you face this adversity, you really pushed through it and moved quickly. And it had to have been hectic, right? I mean, you're in the mindset as the CEO of your company. We're closed, right? You're ready to shut down shop, and then the mayor comes back on and says, "Actually, just kidding," which again was the right thing to do ultimately. But I mean, I can't imagine being in that position and thinking you're closing, and then, okay, now we got to think about all these different guidelines and protocols we need to put in place. So the fact that you were able to do that so quickly with such a great team, as you mentioned, with Robbie and others, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, and the credit really goes to the Seed & Smith team and family. The craziest thought that went through my head was just, Seed & Smith has a very intensive production system. And this is one of the things we like to show on the tour. We like to show all of the work that goes into and how difficult it is to produce, 100 pounds of cannabis that is boutique quality every 5 days. That's what Seed & Smith has the capability of doing. And the first thought that goes through my head is, right, like, what are we going to do with this living inventory, right, that we have worth millions of dollars all under one roof here, with nobody really being allowed to go anywhere. And so that was the real win with being labeled an essential business, is that we could keep that running.
Right, right. And so, and say that again. You said how much cannabis per every 5 days?
100
So
pounds.
yeah, about 100 pounds on average.
Every 5 days, are you staggering grows? And you got, I mean, how big is your operation and how are you doing that?
Yeah, so Seed Smith has about 17,000 square feet of production space. And if you attend one of Robbie's virtual tours, or when all this nonsense is over, shameless plug, right? Come, come see it for yourself. We actually put windows on a bunch of these rooms, and you can come walk through, and you can watch this happen in real time. But we've got 12 flowering rooms, and our flower period is 63 days. And so doing the math with round numbers, if you take 63 and divide it by 12, you get a little bit over 5, right? And so what we do is we stagger planting each of these flower rooms by 5 days. So we plant the first one on day 1, number 2 on day 6, number 3 on 11, all the way till you get to 63. And the result is you harvest each one about every 5 days, and we can get about 100 pounds coming out of each of these rooms, give or take, depending on the varieties or the actual size of the room. And that's one way that we really believe things should work at Seed Smith. If you come in and shop, you're not going to get product that's more than a couple days old, because fresh product is coming into the mix every 5 days, and that has benefits with our extracts, all the way down the line throughout the supply chain.
Is that a different approach that Seed Smith is taking compared to its competitors in terms of that cultivating process?
I'd say there's a small percentage of the industry that does it like this. I mean, you've probably talked to a lot of growers, right? Everybody has their own way, and I would say we're definitely on the more intensive side of the spectrum. That being said, the team has figured out well, and it runs like a well-oiled machine. They haven't missed a harvest once ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the operations just seems seamless, and it sounds like you guys really have it dialed in. But also, I could see the benefits from like a shelf life or a shelf stability standpoint, right? Especially if you have like vape cartridges and how some of the potency levels could change if it's on the shelf for too long, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is degradation of the product, and there's lots of tools that we use to slow that down. The shelf stability on those extracts, we actually believe that that's shelf stable for quite a long time. There's things we do in the post processing stage of things that help with that, and then your standard stuff like keeping it in a fridge, keeping it climate controlled, all that stuff really helps. The flower degrades quicker, mostly because it dries out, and everybody's had super dry weed. It's okay, but it's not where it needs to be.
It gets the job done, right?
We really helped there.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I think, Robbie, were you going to say something?
I was just gonna confirm what he was saying. Like, yeah, just dry weed gets the job done, but it does not do the job appropriately. And like that's the only thing I was gonna add to what he was saying was that that's one of the reasons that we are so hard on our selection process when it comes to strains. We're not one of these companies that, we buy into a strain of the month or a hot strain, some hot genetic, and try to just push it into our grow. Our strains take a long time to be a part of that family, and I think that's that is certainly a unique quality among us, is that we try to focus our attention on that strain health and like how it does amongst everything in our grow, not just itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's evident that Seed Smith is really focused on quality and living up to that boutique kind of name, right? And so, Robbie, since you're talking, I know that Brooks mentioned that you were heading up some community initiatives within the company. So why don't you talk a little bit about those?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, coming from March and what we were dealing with, and the city of Denver wanting to shut everything down, which to this day in 2020, that was probably one of the weirdest days that I've ever had, like just because of all those people. I mean, even me, I was like, I don't even drink, and I was like, I need to get to the liquor store. I need to make sure I have something for this.
Right.
Um,
I'm
and
with
so,
you.
and from that point, when we realized that we were an essential business and that we were going to remain open, and Brooks had mentioned some of these people that we work with, that work for us, that are in the service industry, that are in the music industry. We reacted really fast to get some things off the ground to help sustain those, to help sustain those people, to help sustain the people of our community in our neighborhoods. So with that, we actually, the first thing that we did was reach out to a bunch of musicians that we knew that their tours were just canceled and everybody was just going home. And we tried to be early adopters of this like online music scene that you see going around now. And we did that successfully for a couple months, and had some really wonderful artists from around the area here in Colorado, and even some from Tennessee that were amazing. And like just showing that idea of community and trying to get that out to the people is one of those initial ideas that we had. And then from there we built up. We got more macro local, micro local, macro local.
Macro. I think you got it right. Yeah.
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 So we went more macro level with this, and we ended up donating a lot of funds to some local food pantries, Conscious Alliance, Montbello 2020, and Metro Caring. These are three food pantries that are in the Denver area. Montbello 2020 specifically works with our mother neighborhood, Montbello. And so from that, just giving them a little bit of that, they were propped up for a couple months. And from that point, we have started actually talking more and more with Montbello 2020, and we're working a lot of different initiatives with them to give support, not only during this pandemic, but just in general for the Montbello neighborhood, which over the past couple of decades has really become impoverished, and there's a lot of poverty in the area. So we really want to, and Montbello is a historic neighborhood within the Denver area. People who have lived here their entire lives know this neighborhood, and they don't want to see it go away.
Mm-hmm.
So we've started doing things such as just propping them up with a food drive. As this pandemic continues, they're certainly out there getting food to people that are in their apartments, that are in low income housing, that don't have access to some of these pantries or some of these resources that Montbello 2020 can provide them. So we've started this food drive. And it's actually pretty fun. If you bring in 5 cans of food, you get a free gram joint or a penny gram joint. If you bring in 20 to 25 cans of food, you get a pack of our joints, which is a full eighth of cannabis rolled up in joints for you in a nice convenient pack. So people have responded so well to that we've actually even built upon that, and we said, okay, if collectively every one of our customers comes and like brings in 500 cans, we'll unlock more stuff for you guys to purchase. We'll bring down ounce prices. We'll do like buy one get one half off on the extracts. Like we're starting to see that like we can create a little bit of engagement from the community by helping the community. So that is one that I'm really excited about to continue on.
We don't have places to put all the cans that people bring for joints for cans. So another shameless plug, you heard it here. Please bring cans. We have more joints. We have way more joints. Bring more cans. We want to give them away. We think this is awesome. We couldn't do enough.
Yeah.
When I hear that, I'm thinking like, what better like win-win scenario than that? I mean, food drive, helping the local community with canned food, and the person bringing them is being rewarded with a J.
Yeah, it works well, and And the only thing Robbie sold himself short on is he also set up an initiative through Montbello 2020 where not only are we just dropping these cans off, but we're sending Seed and Smith employees over there every week to help do all the stuff that goes along with that, sorting them, setting up the tents, like setting up the drive-through lines, you name it. And it's just really cool to be a part of the neighborhood, and that's a huge shift from the early days. Most neighborhoods did not want a cannabis company there. And, just like we're trying to change people's perception of like what a cannabis company is, what we do every day, like how hard we work, right? By opening up our doors and saying, hey, here's how this works. Come and see for yourself and, judge for yourself. We're also seeing the role in the community to change from, wow, we don't want you in our backyard, to it's great that you're here, and we're proud to see that, and we're proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, it seems like it's one of those unintended consequences, but in a positive way, with the outcome of COVID, right? I call them pandemic pros, and
There you go.
and that is the local community understanding, and getting to meet these people that are involved in the cannabis industry firsthand, and they have that light bulb moment of these aren't criminals, these aren't bad people, they're just like me. This is a legitimate industry, right? They're just running a business. So it's good that at least the pandemic opened the opportunity for that for y'all, and you're doing it's. I love hearing these stories because we all know how some people are in need right now. It's difficult times for a lot of people and businesses.
From a marketing perspective, it's been marketing and PR perspective, it's been crazy. I mean, it's been a wild year. And I think what has been a joy is that we didn't have to do the normal stuff that we normally have to do. Like, again, this is one of those pandemic pros that you're talking about, where we've been able to be creative and we've been able to really drive at points that we've wanted to as a company for a while, but other things come before that. And then once this pandemic hits, we are able to adjust to that. We are able to pivot to that, and we're able to build off of this model that focuses on helping the community as much as we're like trying to help our bottom line as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, you're well on your way, and I'm glad that you're embracing this new kind of approach that you're taking with the local community and whatnot. And you're planning to continue it on because, again, it seems like a win-win, and you're ultimately helping, right? which is amazing. So.
Yeah, and meeting like wonderful people. Like I would have to say my favorite part of doing all of this really is being, and this sounds like such a cliche answer, but it's totally true, being out with in seeing so many people from so many different backgrounds and so many different experiences. When we're in the cannabis industry, we can tend to be in a vacuum of cannabis folks. So it's always great to be out there with people of those different backgrounds and of those different cultures, just to keep it real and keep it fresh in my mind that these are the real people that we're serving, and along with all of our stoner friends.
Right. And that actually brings up just a question out of curiosity for me, right? Living in Texas, we're not even a medical state. So I look back and I see these states like California, adult use, Colorado, Washington, others, Nevada. And I'm wondering, like, what shocked me when I talked to people from California is that while they were very progressive in their cannabis laws so early on, if you look at the municipalities within California, I think it's like 66% don't want any cannabis businesses operating in that particular district or community. So is that the same in Colorado? I mean, what does the public support look like for the state overall?
I mean, go ahead, Brooks.
I don't know if we could put an exact percentage on it. I would say there's definitely still areas that, so there's areas like Denver, right, which is, which is very accepting, right? And then there's also much more conservative areas, right? Like one in between area would be Colorado Springs that allows for medical cannabis, but doesn't allow for recreational cannabis. So that's a really interesting place to look at within the state. And then you've got places that don't allow it at all. And some of them are some of the smaller municipalities, some of them are some of the larger municipalities. I would say that the amount of acceptance has drastically increased over the years, right? Like doing this in 2010, much higher percentage of places that wouldn't let you do this. And then 2014, so like the sky doesn't fall, right, with medical. So 2014 recreational comes along, and of course many of the same places are scared to let recreational in. So a couple places, Denver, Boulder, etc., right, they go recreational right away. But some are still only medical, and some still don't allow it at all. And so it really depends on where you go. But I don't think it's as extreme in California, right? Like I guess in Colorado, nobody's really more than 20-30 minutes away from recreational cannabis.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I get a sense of a more chill vibe from the Colorado smokers compared to California, but that's just me. I don't know. And plus California is a huge state compared to,
Right.
the territory there compared to Colorado. So,
I mean, in my personal experience, people have, flip-flopped from, I'm a big skier. So I used to be on the ski lift, and the person next to you inevitably turns to you and says, "What do you do?" And so like in the early days, I would lie because I was like, "Oh, I don't want to get in trouble or anything like that." And now I lie because, man, all they're going to do is talk to me about my work for the whole way up. And so I still lie about it. It's just for way different reasons now.
Oh, they're going to ask you for product. They're going to ask you about that joint canned food program. And if
there you go. Just be like, "You got 5 cans, buddy, and we can make it happen."
Oh, that's fun.
Good promotion, Robbie. Find Brooks at the mountain. Bring 5 cans.
Well, let's talk about, I know that Seed & Smith, I looked in your website. Let's talk about new products that you're planning to roll out. And I don't know if this is available or not already, but Dart. Talk a little bit about Dart.
Oh man, yeah. Our Dart product has just seen quite the year as well. We launched this last November, and last October actually, and won the High Times with it, High Times Cup for Colorado, the next month after we released it. And we've won a couple awards with it so far, in our oil that's in it. And what's really exciting about the Dart product is that we've kind of hit a gold mine of flavor and experience when it comes to these products. I am one of these guys. I have a million batteries and I have a million cartridges that are all in my nightstand, and I hardly ever use them because, well, frankly, I'm sick of blueberry tasting stuff or watermelon tasting stuff.
And they're terrible. None of the pens work. I have yet to find a really good battery that, not the pen, but the battery itself that's consistent. I don't know. I can't find one.
So we've all been in this boat. So what we've done with Dart is we went overseas. We know that we can't manufacture these things on our own. So we went overseas, and we've been looking for the best proprietary kind of example as we could find amongst all the cartridges, amongst all the batteries, amongst all the pods. I mean, we talked to probably 24 different companies just about batteries. And so we came across C-Cell, which is the A standard, the A+ standard for this kind of product within this industry. And when we talked to them, they showed us a product that we immediately got excited about. We saw potential for this battery because it was so simple, and the design was so simple. It was long lasting, and like you said, it was consistent. And so we actually entered an application process to be a part of this. We had no guarantee over this thing, and now we are one of 3 providers of this Dart battery. Now that's only the first part of our system, because the real honey of the system is our dart pods, which carry our oil, which is 100% cannabis. Everything in our pen, everything in our oil is derived from the cannabis that we grow in-house. Whether it is the distillate, the live sauce, the terpenes, it all comes from our house. Which is something that we've wanted to set that standard for quite a while now. And I think with our launch, and with the impending vape crisis last year, people have run for the hills, and they don't know what to do anymore because they don't have these botanical strain profiles to work with anymore. We take these profiles that we use in this dart pen, we take it directly from our cannabis plants. So the flavor that you're getting when you're smoking that bowl, or smoking that bowl, I'll say it, I can say it here. When you're smoking that bowl, you're going to get that same flavor experience and that same medicinal experience from our dart pen. And so on top of all of that, we don't believe in a lot of fancy apps. We don't like buttons. We don't like setting temperatures. Everything in this battery comes pre-approved by actually myself and that guy, and a couple other of our directors. And we've all tested these vehemently, lots, to make sure that they're at the level that we want them at. And that's where this is set apart from anything that's out there.
And just to be clear, this is not like a disposable battery, right? This is something where you would just buy a new pod from Seed & Smith to refill.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It is a battery that you can keep with you at all times. I actually have one in my hand because it's 420 and I'm about to smoke this.
I'll smoke it now. Why not?
Well, I know. Oh man,
That's a nice
Kim de la Kim. Very good strain.
Yeah. And what strain is that you're smoking there?
Kim de la Kim.
Kim de la Kim. Awesome.
So it's a Chem D strain. If we're talking strains, Chem Dog is one of the most classic strains. Comes from a bunch of deadheads in the early 90s. There was Chem Dog, Chem D, and Chem 4. And from those, Chem D is the one that's used in Kim de la Kim, and that is crossed with our I-95 strain.
Wow. And what's the potency? What's the THC levels on that?
Kim de la Kim actually runs pretty high. Averagely, it tests between 25 and 29%.
Wow. And you're saying that the dart pods and the battery are available now? You've already launched, or is that
we've launched this product? We've given pandemics and vape crises and all sorts of different stuff. We're trying just to really, again, set out and create this standard for a vape pen that doesn't yet exist. I mean, we've already said it. Now what we're trying to do is spread that message a little bit more, and really try to integrate it into our industry. That using 100% cannabis is the way to go, and using a product that gets you the closest to that experience is what's going to get you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exciting, and congratulations on that launch. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it and see how user adoption comes into play. But it sounds like you got a great product. So
it's really neat. So we one of the things with these darts and the extraction lab that's really cool is when you're extracting this raw distillate, it almost doesn't matter where it comes from, right? The analogy I use is if you're drinking beer, whiskey, wine, vodka, whatever your favorite spirit is, what's actually getting you drunk in there or giving you the buzz, whatever it is ethanol, right? And so when we're distilling cannabis, we're getting well above 95 to 98% pure THC. And so if you were to take a dart like Robbie has there, and if we were just to put the distillate in there, you'd get high, but it'd be a very tame, middle of the road type of high. Now, what we're doing is we're extracting the terpenes from all these various strains, strain by strain, strain specific, and we're reintroducing them back into this distillate at ratios that are similar to the terpene ratio to the THC ratio in the plant, right? And so in the plant, that terpene ratio is going to be somewhere in that, and I'm going to set myself a big range here, but 5 to 15%, right? And so by putting that back into the vape cartridges, the idea and the hope is that that high, whether you're looking at it for medicinal or recreational purposes, is going to be similar to having that same strain in a bowl, in a joint, whatever it may be. And it's been neat to kind of play with that process. We've been playing with that for a couple years now, trying to dial that in. And it's a real cool thing. So, I highly recommend for those who are interested, come in and grab a joint or an eighth of whatever particular flower you might like. Grab the dart as well, and kind of compare and contrast those two. We'd be interested in your feedback.
Yeah. And so where can they, so if we're gonna wrap this up, where can they find you guys? Like website, is there a product page for this stuff? And then also social media?
So we're all over Instagram. Most of Cannabis is, so we're there with everybody. And we're on Facebook as well. But if you go over to our website, we do have a page committed to the dart that should have all of our available stores that we are in. Right now, I believe we're in 85 stores throughout the state of Colorado, ranging all around. Like thankfully, unless you're really deep in the mountains, you're not too far from a dart.
And is there anything else that you guys, I know we've talked about a lot, and the great things that Seed & Smith is doing, both, with its community initiatives and the local community, as well as, the high quality products that y'all are producing, plus the education factor. Is there anything else that you want to cover or leave the audience with before we sign off?
Ooh.
Not much for me. Just we really appreciate you talking with us and helping spread the good word. We take look. We've built this thing from the ground up, and we take it very seriously. We're not afraid to show everybody what we're doing here, and so it's a neat thing. We ask that you come check it out. Now, please stay safe, wear your mask, and check it out virtually. But as soon as we get through all this nonsense, we'll be one of the first to open our doors, and we'd love to come talk to people again.
I want to be one of the first ones in line for the grow tours when we can do those in person again. Because, again, for those listening, if you haven't seen it, check out Seed & Smith's website. Really, really cool. The tours. It's almost like a high end interactive museum that you have, because the facility is so big. So
it is. And you know what? I'll even say this. I'm working on things in the background that nobody's even seeing yet. I mean, maybe Brooks has seen a little bit of it, but there's a lot more topics to be added to the tour too when we get to go live again in person. And we can't wait. Like I love doing tours with people. I love seeing the smiling faces on them when they learn about this plant. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe I can get a private tour. Colorado's not too far of a drive from Dallas, so we can make it happen, man.
Let us know when you're here. Anytime.
And I want to pick up some of those pre-rolls also, and the dart, of course, because you got me sold on that. It sounds amazing.
All right. Well, just bring those cans.
I will. Hey, well, I want to thank you guys again for your time. Really appreciate the insights you shared. And as, like you said, we get past this nonsense and the industry starts to evolve and continues to evolve, I'd love to have you on again to talk about more of the great things that Seed & Smith is doing.
Absolutely. Would love it.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you later. Bye.